So if you're ever looking for a bear case on Rocket Lab, take a look at the difference in facial expression between the CEO and the CFO. So Peter Beck is here looking all happy, like, yep, everything's going great. Give us your money. We're doing all these amazing things. And Adam Spice, he's like, oh my God, I've seen the end times. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So Rocket Lab went up about 50% since we made our last video. So we wanted to make this update to figure out whether or not this changes our overall thesis. And we're going to be looking over this investor update to figure that out. And I'm here with Kenny from Red Cliff Research, somebody who is far more experienced than me with looking through these sorts of presentations. So Kenny, if you want to introduce yourself to the people, this is your first time on the Launch Window Research channel.
Hey, yeah, super big shoes to fill there. Thanks, Nathan, for that. But yeah, my name is Kenny. I'm a co-founder of Red Cliff Research, which is a data analytics heavy firm that looks to identify signal from the noise. Essentially, what we try to do is set up the trade, quantitatively speaking, for retail investors like yourself. And obviously, we're very bullish on space, and we're definitely keen to think about what the space sector is going to do here. So yeah, thanks.
So this is a summary of what Rocket Lab has done just overall as a company, but I have put in a few numbers here to indicate what has happened since March when we initially got this announcement that they would be going public and they announced Neutron. They have launched 3 rockets. They have also deployed their 100th satellite, and they've also successfully recovered their second booster. Now, they are taking a different approach from SpaceX when recovering their boosters. They are not using propulsive landing, but they are recovering using parachutes. Currently, they're just fishing them out of the sea after they land softly, but they plan to catch them right out of the sky as they fall using a helicopter, so that the seawater doesn't get into the engines and it'll be a much smoother recovery with a lot less refurbishment. They are yet to refly a booster, but we will likely see that next year, and that's something to really look forward to.
So one thing I want to point out here is there's 7 successful missions for the U.S. government customers. So that's obviously Space Force, U.S. Air Force, and SOCOM, so Special Operations Command. These are interesting clients for me because these are what I would call the bread and butter of kind of an earnings report. That is that it's the big baseline that you can account for. We always like to see that. That's kind of like, you know, your Wendy's kind of Whopper. Always want to sell the Whopper, but the thing that makes you the most money might be that little fancy salad.
So another thing that happened this year was one of their missions, I think it was the one where they were carrying black sky satellites, failed to make it to orbit. So this ended up being a problem with the upper stage of the rocket, which has since been fixed, and they have gotten the Electron fully functional again and have put some Space Force satellites back up. If you're concerned about this particular launch failure, I would say Rocket Lab has, I think, 3 failures under their belt out of a little over 20 launches. That's a pretty decent record. I think SpaceX's first rocket had 3 failures out of 5, and look at them today. A few launch failures is okay. The only space program that I can think of with no launch failures under their belt is Blue Origin, and based on their track record, a lack of launch failures is not a great metric to determine the success of a space company. Okay, so this year they also grew their backlog from just under 60 million to over 140 million. And this slide is a bit outdated. It's currently over 170 million for their backlog. And this is great. We love to see a company triple their backlog in a single year, because it's all about looking for whether or not this company has enough runway to become profitable and make enough money to develop all of these projects they have lined up for the future.
The one thing that I want to say about backlogs is that backlogs are contractually obligated, meaning that the contract is in place. And so once that backlog kind of recedes, that the money and the inflows and free cash flow will come in. So this is really important, and don't discount this as something that they will or will not get.
Kenny, it looks like you were absolutely right when you called this out. They did end up adding 3 members to their board as a result of this merger agreement. And that's something we predicted. This is good. We want people with different types of experience in the financial world to come and help this company achieve their goals.
Yeah, so these 3 people, Merlene, John, and Alex, are essentially just financial kind of C-level executives. So what these 3 people are doing is they're trying to kind of onboard more clients and more customers to essentially get Rocket Lab to that bigger total addressable market.
Also, it was just earlier this year that they announced Neutron, their new 8-ton medium-class launch vehicle designed for humans and mega constellations. So our last Rocket Lab video, somebody commented something very, very interesting. They found an interview that Peter Beck gave where he dropped a very, very juicy secret about Neutron.
I will say that the image you see of Neutron there is a bit of a ruse. Neutron looks nothing like that. Basically, we're sick of people copying us all the time. So we put that image there as a bit of a, well, at least internally it's a joke. I think externally people are probably busily copying it right now. But that's not actually what Neutron looks like, and there's going to be an announcement here in time where we'll actually show what we've really built.
So yeah, that PNG that we got of Neutron is actually not what Neutron looks like at all. I'm assuming that in the coming months we will see what it actually looks like. But yeah, that was a complete ruse to throw off Rocket Lab's competition.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of years, in fact, almost 12 years in special operations. And so one of the things that I did for special operations is a lot of counter and disinformation analysis and narrative framing. One of the things that I always love to see is things like this. So this is like, if you're familiar with Patton's Ghost Army, where Patton inflated a bunch of tanks across the Atlantic and to ruse the Germans into thinking that they had a bunch of tanks and brigades on the ground. So this is, tantamount to that. I love that, especially in an industry where it's all about R&D and it's about R&D spend. How can you not only get ahead, but how can you also kind of obfuscate what's going on within your kind of workbench, work parameters? Love to see it. So as you can see on this kind of chart here, there's launch, which went from 8.5 million to 24.1 million, right? That's an interesting increase, but more interesting is the actual space systems. So look at space systems, 0.3, essentially nil, right? To 5.4. So that is kind of parabolic growth, things that I love to see. And then look at gross margin going from a loss of 5.9 to 3.9. And that's exceptional. And that's indeed why the future mapping and future forecast with the backlogs is going to be essential to the growth of this company. But this is just to showcase kind of, not so much the things that they're doing bad, but the things that they're doing good. And again, this has everything to do with the CFO trying to put their best foot forward. So the first thing that is actually really good, though, there was only 3% redemption. So for typical SPACs, you're looking at upwards of 57% to 75% redemptions out the gate, right? That means people invested in this company are actually invested in this company. So that is really good. Now, there are some little bit of red flags that I kind of came across, and they're not like detrimental to the company, but I do want to talk about them. There's a couple pieces, though, when it calls for GAAP versus non-GAAP. So GAAP is essentially the general accepted accounting practices. Right? That's what you file with the SEC. That said, non-GAAP usually tells the story much better. It's literally the story of the company. They have considered stock-based compensations and the SPAC fees to be a part of those non-GAAP kind of filings. This is okay to me if you've done it once, but actually Rocket Lab did it 3 times and they've kind of sprinkled it into a couple of different things. So you just want to watch that on the net earnings report. Interesting thing is, do recall that this earnings report is for the first entire half and not just a quarter. So that's not generally accepted. Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is R&D versus SG&A. So if you don't know what SG&A is, it's just general and administrative costs, but it's the cost of doing business day to day. And as you can see, though, that they've onboarded a ton of new people and a ton of employees. It's only gone from 11.3 to 13.7. So that cost is actually very nominal. In terms of R&D, looking at 3 times increase, almost 3 times increase, but that is actually what we want to see. So I'm absolutely bullish on this chart right here. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot on this slide, but the gist of it is they're losing money, and that's to be expected from a startup. So I'm not really worried about it. This is actually what I want to see. You should be losing money.
Amazing. End the video there. Perfect DD. All right, so the last thing we wanted to talk about is on the next slide. And this is something that Marcus from Redcliffe pulled out. So if you're ever looking for a bear case on Rocket Lab, take a look at the difference in facial expression between the CEO and the CFO. So Peter Beck is here looking all happy, like, yep, everything's going great. Give us your money. We're doing all these amazing things. And Adam Spice, he's like, oh my God, I've seen the end times where it's his job to make sure all the rocket scientists don't go and blow their allowance like a bunch of toddlers. So he is probably miserable right now.
Oh yeah, for the Red Cliffs fans, Peter Beck is Tommy here, spending all of our money on data analytics, processes, and innovation. And then Adam Spice is essentially Marcus telling Tommy to take a seat, cowboy. No, that's basically how you end it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.